Hey, this is Alvin from Unleash. Today we are going to record a Ruby video and we will show you how to add feature flags to a very bare bones Ruby command line app using the Unleash feature flag open source solution. The first thing you want to do is get to the repo. So it's GitHub unleash/unleash and clone the repo. For me, because I've already have it clone, it will tell me it's already there. So, but for you, clone, take your time. Get into the repo, and then you will want to start the app with Docker Compose. It's Docker Compose up-d. All of this is in documentation anyway, but then you can see that it's running and will run in the background. So now you're done with Unleash. What happens is Unleash will now be set up at localhost 4242. And then now you have your own Unleash instance. You log in with the credentials of admin, and the password is Unleash for all with the number 4. You sign in, and I already have a project set up. You will have nothing. But you will be able to add your own feature flags. Again, you will end up with a view that looks like this. There's only one project because you're self-hosted, but that's it. That's your own Unleash instance running on your computer, where now you can create feature flags and do all sorts of other things. But this is the self-hosted product. So, we want to create a new feature flag. The app will say new feature toggle. You can give it a name. Right now I'm going to call it GraphQL API, because we want our app to use this toggle to toggle obviously between either the GraphQL version of an API or the REST version of that API. Again, just an example. This is, you don't have to do as I did. You don't have to use hyphens, but now you have your own feature flag and you can toggle them on and off. Now you're basically done on the Unleash side for now, but now we need to set up our own Ruby code, right? So how do we do this? For now, I'm coming back because I was in the Unleash repo. I'm going to make a new directory called Unleash Ruby. Let's say just Unleash Ruby then. I'm going to go into this directory, change my current directory to this one using the cd command. There's nothing in that directory, so we'll just create a new file. We'll call it main.ruby, and now we're ready to start working. Let's install our dependencies first. So we're done. And then we're done with all this setup stuff. I'm going to use HTTPX for the requests, and then Unleash itself to connect with Unleash. Right. The gems are installing great. Everything is set up. Again, I'm using HTTPX for the requests and Unleash. Right. So let's do a classic tutorial thing. Let's use the Star Wars API. As I said, we'll be toggling between the REST and the GraphQL version of that API, right? So let's get going with the code. Let's open VS Code. We have our main Ruby file right now with nothing in it. So we first require HTTPX. We're going to require JSON because these APIs will return JSON objects, and then Unleash itself. Okay, what do we do here? First, we want to make a call. Just make a GET request to this API, right? To the, again, in classic tutorial style, the Star Wars API. So what are we going to get? Let's see. What do we want? Do we want to use the people endpoint? Do we want to use the planet endpoint? Starships? Let's see. What do we want here? People, maybe. planets. There's lots of people. Let's see. Let's get the planets, right? Right, so right now, but we don't want to just retrieve the first planet, we want to retrieve all of them, right? So we can do that. And let's make sure our basic request is working, and just print out the response. And there we go. Okay. So we're getting a JSON back that has lots of stuff. But right now it's still a string. So we've logged that string, but it's not a JSON object, as in it's not a Ruby object, right? So we want to parse this with JSON.parse, this from the dependency that we required, which is, the standard, part of the standard library called JSON. So we're going to parse the body of this response. And there's loads of stuff in it, so we're not interested in everything. So everything is stored in a results array, a results key. So just want to show this for now and put this in a planets variable. Print that, we can see the same thing, great, but that's our planets JSON. Okay. What do we want to do now? We have our planets. And should we try to get to the GraphQL version of it just yet? Nah. I still think this is too complicated. So let's map this and make it a little bit easier. Because right now, again, we have a lot of data there. So we'll just keep it nice. And we just want our planets array to be nice and tidy. So let's just return, let's just have an array of objects that just contains the name and the population. And this is again so we're just grabbing this from the other object. Okay. Now let's see if it worked. As usual, print it out to the console, sorry. Here we go. Let's see. Perfect. Now you can see this is much, much nicer. Or we just have an array of objects that have name and population. Great. Much, much easier to deal with. Okay. So I'm seeing some warnings from Unleash, so I'm going to comment it out now. Just so it's a bit clearer. If we print again, here we go. We can clear that. Perfect. Now what do? Well, we want to do the GraphQL version. How do we do this? First, let's make sure we can toggle between both versions. So we'll use, for now, a feature flag in a variable called isGraphQL. And if this variable is true, then we shall use the GraphQL version of the API, right? And we can print hello GraphQL to the console. And else we'll do what we've done before, meaning the REST API. Ending the block. Let's print our planets. Not here, but let's print it in, well, ideally we'll print them in both cases. But first, let's make sure we print them in the block that contains the data, right? So, let's see if it works. And right now, because it's false, you're seeing REST API. And if we set that as GraphQL flagged true, we want to get the results coming from the GraphQL API. But it's not there yet, so just hello GraphQL. Right, so now how do we find the GraphQL API? We'll just Google it. And I had it saved, but this is not what we want. So this is the playground. Let's see. It's surprisingly difficult to find the actual URL. Which one is it already? back to the playground. No, okay, yeah. So this does not look like an official URL, but it is. So this is the official GraphQL version of the Star Wars API. So we know what to do. We'll use this as our endpoint, and we'll try to get a response out of it. So for GraphQL, it's a little bit more complicated, right? It's not just a simple GET request. We'll first have to use a POST request, make sure we're using that endpoint again. We have to give it more data. The most important one being the request itself, but we'll get there. In the body of the request, we'll get, as I said, the query itself. Sorry, the request, I meant the query earlier. The GraphQL query is what we want to send it. We don't have it yet, but make sure when we do, change it to JSON and then a bunch of headers. Because it's GraphQL, it's going to ask for more, and it's a POST request. So what are the first things it wants to do? And I believe, the only thing is how to create just a content type. Just to specify a content type. We want this to be application JSON. And then now what's missing? What's missing is our query, as I said. I said request earlier, but no, query, our GraphQL query. Meaning, telling it what we want to retrieve, because this is GraphQL. It's not like REST, where we have to do all this we have to do all of this processing and whittling down of the array. After receiving the request, we'll specify in the request what we want the API to return to us. So what do we want? First, we want an object called query that itself has a key called query, and this is GraphQL, not me. And then we can finally put our request in. So what do we want? As we said before, we want all the planets. And this is in an object called planets. It's a relationship, so that's just the way GraphQL works. A bit annoying, but hey. And then, just like before, we want the population and the name. Now we can see if this works again. Let's try to print this out and see what happens. Again, we have our feature flag set to true. And what did I do here? Oh no, I did something wrong with my string. What's going on? The eagle-eyed among you will be able to find this out already, but it's not super obvious just yet. What did I do wrong? Oh, was it this? Yeah, that was it. Sorry, this is my JavaScript instincts. So yeah, I added an extra space between the Y and the colon. But now we're back. We got our response back. We have a list of our planets. You'll see the list is significantly larger. That's because the REST API is paginated. In the normal scenario, you'll account for that, paginate the REST API. But again, this is just for demonstration. What's important for here is we're getting a response that we can parse, and we have a way of toggling in the code right now, just with a variable, what happens. So again, let's clear up this JSON object a little bit. So we want planets.allplanets.planets. Everything's in a data object. As I said, allplanets.planets. And this should give us what we're after. Let's print it out again to the console and see what happens. There you go. But now it's an actual Ruby object. we want to specify again if we're if the data is coming from GraphQL or from REST, so it's easier for us to figure out what's happening rather than just look at JSONs. Perfect, now we're getting hello GraphQL because our variable, our feature flag, which is just a variable right now, is set to true. Now let's get to unleash. And we want to add our feature flag. So it's now dynamic and something you can toggle elsewhere. Okay, so now we're going to turn our static feature flag into a dynamic one powered by unleash. And this is where we're going to use the unleash Ruby gem. So it's this variable that we're going to replace. So here we go. First, we want to create an instance of the client. So we declare a variable and create an instance. Client, then new. Give it an app name. I think for this one, it doesn't really matter. Just call it Ruby. You want to put this as the URL to your Unleash instance. In our case, it's going to be localhost with the project we set up earlier. That's localhost 4242/API. And then a bunch of parameters, which are being custom headers. And this is where we'll put our API token. So it's an object which can accept anything as a normal header would, but we'll put our token in the authorization header. Copy and paste it, grab it from our project, and already have a client token set up. Copy it. And set it. And here we go. So now what do? We need to replace the value of our variable by something, as I said, dynamic, powered by unleash. So let's do that. And let's grab the value of our flag, which we called, if you remember, GraphQL API. Nothing else should change. So now we see it's set to rest. Why? Because it's false in the client. And if we change it, as I said, it's hello rest. Now what happens? We can go back to our project. If we toggle this in development, now we're get GraphQL. And that's it.